So, I am on a walk, recording this video. I honestly hate recording myself so much. Like, even if I do upload this, I know that maybe 10 or 12 people are gonna do it. But as far as like, I don't know, it just makes me feel so like hyper aware of everything. I mean, nobody likes to hear themselves talk, but even while I'm talking, I've got this sort of weird like echo of everything I say going on, and just like everything I say, I instantly analyze myself, including this. I don't know, it's weird. It's just like you instantly judge yourself. Anyways, walking here, just thinking about stuff, and specifically I was just thinking about, like, I know it's a super cliche phrase, like live in the moment, but I think there's like different meanings of it, and a lot of the time it is like either misconstrued or it's used as a sort of like carpe diem kind of phrase, like seize the day kind of thing, like, oh, like live in the moment. If someone offers you something, you know, even though you're hesitant, like accept it quickly because you're like living in the moment. But the other way that can go, like maybe in its most literal way, is just like pay attention to each second, which I think it's starting to rain. Also, I know like landscape mode is annoying, but this is just much more comfortable for me to deal. And if somebody drives by, I can just say that I'm FaceTiming or I think it's gonna pour. But anyways, I've been meditating lately for maybe 15 or 20 minutes a day. I've tried in the past, but it's something that I always kind of end up starting to do and then getting a little bit of a good practice going and then instantly just like ditching, maybe after like 2 or 3 weeks. Once like my stress levels totally peak, I kind of sort of give that up, even though I know that ultimately like that's just gonna make me more stressed out. Somehow I still find that I'm slacking on those kinds of things that could possibly relieve. And the same thing happens with like exercise or anything like that. When I get super overwhelmed, it's just like bad decisions are kind of drawn out of me and I just drop everything. But this time I've been trying to keep it somewhat consistent, and I don't know if I've noticed so many things as far as mental or physical changes go. I think being a little more aware of my emotional state and just trying to keep, like, to do little checks of just where I am. Sometimes even just like, say you do really feel like shit, just recognizing for a split second, like, oh, I feel like shit. Even that knowledge, for some reason, just helps in some way. Not because it makes you think of, oh, like, I just feel like shit right now, like, maybe I'll feel, even if you don't feel okay later, just like the knowledge that you're experiencing this certain emotion and it's making you feel this certain way makes it seem like a little less severe. I guess knowing what's going on kind of like lowers the drama of everything, because sometimes when I'm being like super self-indulgent and I'm just so like knotted around and wrapped in my head and I've been in the same thought process for like an hour, what I've been noticing lately is when like I'm getting myself into that kind of zone, or where I just feel things like peaking and peaking and peaking, I'm good at like picking that up and saying like, wait, like, hold on a second, slow down, And it's not like during those times like I meditate, like I literally just take 1 or 2 minutes and just like do nothing. Like I don't try to think I just literally like stop myself from moving around. And honestly, even doing that has been somewhat helpful, because even like just like sort of putting a stop to the momentum, like there's a break in what's happening, and then I find that like it's almost like there's an early peak to whatever fucking state of panic I'm in, and then I kind of take a shortcut to get back to baseline being still stressed out, but at least not in the same place where I was before. So with that little sidetrack over, going back to like being in the present moment, what I think about that, and what I think of a lot of the culture surrounding meditation and that kind of spirituality, I think it turns a lot of people off, and they want to go away from it for really valid reasons. Like when you hear people talk about like, oh, I had like this ceremony where my third eye was opened, or I just had all my chakras aligned. And then there are some people who take it to like super extreme terms, where people start perceiving auras or just like picking up energy fields, at which point I think like any reasonable person is kind of like, okay, this is fucking stupid. Which is why I think it's kind of a shame that meditation has become so entwined in that kind of weird, like stereotypical, almost superficial spirituality. I know that sounds weird, but it's the same way when like someone takes a psychedelic and then, obviously it's a super meaningful experience for them, but just hearing it recounted, and it's like every single sort of, cliche spiritual awakening trope ever in just like one story. And they're like, oh, like my ego was completely obliterated, and I saw the history of the universe, and then underlying everything, it was just like geometrical shapes, and all reality is a surface illusion, and underneath there's just like love, and it's the force that like keeps everything, literally holds everything together. Which is like, after hearing that 1,000 times, those concepts don't have any sort of hitting power anymore. Which initially, something that really turned me off of meditation was just like that entire culture that's kind of been like shoved up right against the traditional culture of meditation, which at this point is like so warped and skewed that all the, even the terms associated with it now, I'm sure wouldn't have been used in connection, like when meditation wasn't this new huge sort of cure-all. Oh, it smells so good. For everything, I guess. This is the first car I've seen. Anyways, not to say like the reason I started meditating is because I've had pretty severe generalized anxiety for like 4 or 5 years. I'm being bitten the fuck up by mosquitoes, but it sucks ass. I mean, obviously something like that does suck ass, but I found that everything I've done to combat it, even if some new stupid method I have or whatever doesn't like per se work, even feeling that I'm actively doing something to alleviate any symptoms I'm getting has a kind of beneficial effect. It maybe that's just from fooling my brain into thinking like, oh, like things are getting better now, like everything's on track, which is like, I'm sure everyone like who suffers from anxiety goes through just like testing periods of new sources of help and then immediately discards them. Like, I've done that with so much stuff. But I guess meditation is really something like that I haven't gotten into far enough to really know what kind of like, if it does have any kind of beneficial effect. Like, I haven't maintained practice long enough and kind of been deep enough into it to really like get a feel for whatever it is that can give me to help with like whatever it is in my life. But back to the point like 15 minutes ago or whatever, after I think now it's been maybe only like 2 weeks, maybe like 2.5 weeks, I don't know, I think I feel a little bit different, honestly. But I feel like I started an argument and I'm just taking the longest fucking circle in jumping topics to get back to my initial thing. I'm just uploading this whole thing. I don't care. Like, most of my videos get like 10 or 20. I feel stupid even saying anything into a camera and then uploading it, just because the impact is going to be so minimal that I might as well just keep it in my gallery or whatever, but who cares? I think something like that, especially like, I think I've gravitated more towards kind of that notion of the present moment more than I have mindfulness. It's just because I noticed after periods of like 15 or 20 minutes of meditation, like I would kind of automatically be in that zone for a minute. Like, my mind was somewhat cleared out and the only thing that was really going into it was just like the physical input around me and just kind of like the overall feel of my environment. And I think without sort of feeling that, like when I used to hear the phrase like, oh, just like be present, whatever, not only is it just like fucking corny and you want to punch people when they say that, because really like it doesn't mean anything, and aside from experiencing it firsthand, there's no real point in talking about it, especially like to hear someone gloating about that. It's kind of just like, come on, man, like fuck off. That's the vaguest like piece of advice that is so, because it's so hard to just like apply and you don't even know like how to apply it. But that's the main thing, like there's nothing to apply. So after these periods of meditation, maybe for 10 or 15 minutes, I try to just like stay, it's hard to explain, but just like whatever sensory, anything, like I'm like all 5 senses, just to like not lose sight of them and kind of have them as like one unbroken thing. But the thing is, if you start thinking of like whatever method you're using, like if I started thinking of that, I would immediately lose track, because obviously whenever you're just like, after a few minutes you'll plunge back into just like normal thought, and then you realize like you haven't been paying attention to anything around you for however long you've been thinking about whatever it is, and you're like, shit. And then like it kind of comes back. One thing I've noticed specifically is just like sound is a good way, at least for me, to kind of root myself in that, because I think the brain tunes out, I mean, yeah, obviously the brain tunes out like constants, that kind of sensory information that like it doesn't need, it kind of just like discards. So I found that like when I am lost in a train of thought, I realize like I haven't heard whatever it is, like you know, the air conditioner running, or just like crickets chirping, or just like water. It's almost like stopped. And then as soon as I kind of draw myself back, like I can hear it again. Even though obviously like I was getting the information the whole time, but my brain was just putting it in some place where it might as well not have been there. But I think one, it's extremely hard to do that, to just like, because the brain is so fucking used to just dealing with like heaps of garbage, and I don't want to like speak for everything, but I just consume like so much bullshit, media and information and all a bunch of other stuff that at points is just like totally overwhelming and makes you feel like your life is just like some stupid fucking retarded, like nonsensical mess, just like total drudgery. And since we're used to doing that, to try to sort of like, I wouldn't say put up a barrier, but to replace the order, like move those physical senses from their discarded place, like to one that's fully occupying whatever it is in your head, you know, the one that's like, that's, you're not thinking about it, but you're using all your mental capability to kind of just absorb physical surroundings. And it's extremely hard to do. Like, it might seem sort of easy, but especially when you first try it, like it's just again and again and again and again, you just continually like lose awareness. And secondly, I think like it can be a super powerful thing too, but if you say that, it makes it seem like in like a spiritual sense, you know, like, oh, it was like such a powerful thing. And then if it's like enlightening, if you think of it that way, then you're bringing in all of those other concepts, and I think it kind of cheapens like the feeling itself, which is why like the only reason I've continued to do it isn't in pursuit of like any of those kinds of things, like enlightenment or whatever it is. It's just like I honestly like the state that it puts me in. Like, it's calmness, but I don't know, it's deeper than calmness in a way, because you know, calmness can just be like you or me just reclined on a bed eating fucking junk food, super tired and calm. Wow, look at this, hang on. The light levels aren't nearly as flattering as this direction, but it's so much nicer. But as someone that does obviously have like generalized anxiety, it means like there are days, and sometimes it seems like all the time, where I have like a constant maintained level of like slight paranoia and nervousness. And I think, like, ironically, like, the brain does the same sort of thing that it does with noise, whereas it ignores it. But the thing is, it's still there. Like, I'm still in some part of the subconscious or whatever, like, experiencing that. And just because, like, it isn't at the center of my mind, like, it's still detrimental. But I think the mind is just kind of attempting to do the same thing. Like, it realizes there's no gain at all to being in that sort of like slightly anxious state, so it just pushes it to another place. But it's still there. And then I've noticed at these times of just like trying to be present and trying to be aware, it's like my brain can't really do that, because I guess in trying to kind of like be completely occupied by whatever it is around you, it's almost like I don't have enough room to just like ignore that feeling of anxiety. And even, I mean, sometimes I just like immediately perceive it. It's like it's been buried, and then as soon as like I just give my mind a chance to like slow down, it comes sort of bubbling up. But so yeah, I guess that's pretty much all I wanted to say about that. I'm glad I did it in a very straightforward, simple way and stayed on topic. But the other thing I wanted to mention, as far as like psychedelic drugs go, I've taken pretty large doses of shrooms and acid, and I've never, I mean, I don't know, I find shrooms to be much more sort of like valuable, and I know a lot of people have it the other way around. And obviously, like, both drugs have totally different effects on different people, so it could be that way for someone else. But all of my acid trips have been like a bunch of shit goes down, you know, a dose, there's a bunch of crazy realizations, and I'm like, oh, like, it feels so big that I'm like, things are gonna be different from here on out. Like, this has been some life-changing event. And then 2 or 3 days after, I'm just mentally, wow, it's so fucking beautiful out. I'm just mentally in the same exact space as I was before. Like, there has been no change. Maybe I just had like an afterglow for like a day or two. Look at this. But once that wraps up, it's like, okay, like, that was cool. And then I've noticed that like some of the realizations or the big breakthroughs I have, once like the day or two of still being like somewhat up on the drug have worn off, I'm like, that's so stupid. Like, did I seriously think like that was some huge meaningful thing? Which I'm kind of glad that I still have that awareness to know that, like, okay, maybe my mind was going a little overboard. Like, that's a little too much. And that's happened a few times where, you know, those kinds of events happen. And even like the next morning, I'm just like, no, that's not the way it is. But the difference I've noticed, it's kind of weird to say, but like with magic mushrooms, is that I think on a certain dose, it becomes less about having personal breakthroughs and more about just like the experience in itself, especially if you're in a place outdoors or someone really beautiful. Like, it becomes much more about, and this is just like purely for me, but the trip is like much more oriented around the external world and just like nature. But it's just been for me literally like nature, like nothing added on top of that, nothing like, oh, like I'm a part of nature and it's like so beautiful, or like everything is like interconnected or whatever. It's just like the way it shifts your senses. Like anything can be like overwhelmingly beautiful or terrible or just like new and foreign. And I think that's why, especially when you're doing that in an outside place, like even just observing, and this is going back to like in terms of the present moment, just like observing everything that's going on can have like a giant impact. And that way it's also kind of free from those like stereotypical kind of concepts, you know, like you don't have your third eye's not opening and your aura isn't going to be strengthened by like 100 times when you're done with the experience, or you're not going to like purge all like the negative emotional, which some people do. Or if some people feel that, like what the fuck, that's could be just as genuine as an experience as mine. Like I'm not saying that's not. I'm just saying I think the reason why those experiences stuck with me is because they're so removed from that kind of thing, from that sort of spirituality. And maybe I'm just cynical, and like if I wasn't, maybe I could like incorporate some of the other stuff that I've had on acid trips or whatever. But the things that really stay are just like specific moments and experiences that can remain wordless and don't have to be incorporated into anything. Like they feel apart from the rest of my, because I mean, when you're in that elevated kind of state, obviously it feels totally different, but they really do feel like completely separate. And I guess trying to articulate what any drug feels like using words is like pretty pointless, because there's no way to communicate mental states and feelings like that. But to conclude, there was one time where I took a pretty big dose of shrooms and things went, oh, I just stepped in fucking shit. I'm not showing it, that's disgusting. Anyways, things went kind of south. I don't know, I found that it's so stupid of me to do, but like I think a lot of people do that, where if they're feeling particularly stressed out or bogged down, they're like, oh, let me just take this psychedelic and it'll like ease off the pressure a little bit and I'll get kind of a bigger picture look, and then my problems won't be as painful to deal with. And then you actually do it and you're still in that headspace of being stressed out and bogged down. So those things are just sort of amplified and you're like, well, fuck, that was kind of stupid. But I've tried to become like more aware of timing as far as ingesting those kinds of things is concerned. And I find that like spur of the moment, it's so fucking beautiful. That sort of spur in the moment kind of thing. Like, oh, why don't I just take however many grams of this because I have nothing to do? Like for me, that's almost always ended in disaster. But one specific time, I think I took, I don't remember how much I took. Like maybe, definitely way more than a gram, but I don't know how affected my tolerance was, which is probably why I took so much. And I went for a jog, which is, I don't know, some people like doing those sort of physical activities while doing that, but it didn't go very well for me. And I guess the hyper awareness of your body's condition, and maybe like I don't normally get like too much of like a body load or a body high, but maybe what little bit I did was just negatively impacting it. So I was sprinting, and then I was like, shit, this is horrible. And I stopped because I literally felt like I was gonna be sick. And I was in that sort of uncomfortable zone where you're like half tripping out. And it's almost like you're you're part way experiencing like the sort of warped, like crazy, amazing headspace is just like partway there, which is kind of weird because it's so monumental when you do take like a big dose and you do break through. But if you just kind of like halfway do it, I always feel sort of uncomfortable. So I was in that zone, and then what I noticed is afterward, first I like was running, I stopped, and then I had kind of like a quick mental breakdown. I was just on the side of the road, and I tried like, in my head, I tried literally like grabbing all my anxiety and like negative thoughts and like grouping them into one place and strengthening that negativity like as much as I could. I just wanted to like gather it up in one spot, and I did that. And then I guess my next step was just to like get rid of it, which is, of course, it's gonna be so simple. So obviously that didn't work. Like, I basically made myself feel as bad as possible on purpose, kind of like to just have a grasp on everything. But then there's no way to just like obviously rid yourself of everything bothering you. So I kind of gave up. But what I noticed is when I finally like kind of came down and settled down a little bit, I had no interest in like any sort of extra outside information. Like, even the thought of listening to music was just like, it almost made me feel sick, like to even think about, like to just have a song that carried a kind of emotion or like was supposed to bring up some kind of emotion, you know, like the pressure of that, of sort of that like emotional interplay of like the song is communicating something, or like it can be perceived a certain way, and then we kind of give that emotion back. But I just didn't want to do that. And then even worse was like what I normally do, which is just spend an hour or two or three just like watching YouTube videos, was like the most unappealing thing I could possibly think of. Like, there was no way I was gonna do that. Like, I wouldn't say it was disgust, it was more just like I was so turned away from any of that. Like, I didn't want to ingest or like put myself in front of any kind of media at all. Like, I just wanted I felt like seeing none of it. Like, there wasn't like a song I wanted to listen to, or something I wanted to read up on, or something I want to watch. It was like suddenly my pull to all of those things was just like totally non-existent. Like, I wanted nothing at all to do with any of that. So I sat on my bed, and maybe for like an hour or an hour and a half, I just listened to the sound of the freeway, which is outside my room. And that's the only thing I felt like doing, was that. Like, I just wanted to sit, do nothing, just not have my mind occupied or interrupted by anything else I was putting into it. And I just wanted like a clean, sort of undisturbed state of mind. Like, nothing, I didn't even really want, I know it sounds weird, but like, I didn't want something to cheer me up and make me extremely happy. Obviously, I didn't want to keep feeling bad, but, and honestly, like, it helped. Like, the only thing that did make me feel better was just sitting there and being still and just listening. And I found that same sort of feeling every once in a while comes back. I mean, sometimes at obvious times when, like, I've wasted all day watching stupid shit for like 6 hours, and then the sun setting, etc., kind of like today. And then other times it'll just arise out of nowhere. And I found that when I do meditate, or when I do take time just to like focus on what's happening now in my external environment, like, it does kind of in a way help that urge, I guess, to just, I guess it's really like an escapist kind of thing. Like, you want to get away from everything. But I think the closest I have come to finding that is just through being aware in meditation. If you do succeed, because I mean, obviously it's not about like eradicating all thought, but even if you do calm the mind down, then it can literally be an escape from like every single thought you're having. And I don't know, I think that's like a big thing to have. And I think especially like for people that do have anxiety, or even if you don't have anything and you're just feeling overwhelmed, which God fucking knows is like an increasingly common sort of norm, I guess, for everyone. But because like I was sick of everything, and that's a really weird thing to feel, but like I was fucking tired of literally like every single thing I could think of. I wanted nothing to do with it. And I guess obviously like media and that, but also just like I didn't want to have any conversations. I didn't really want to move. Like, I was just so fucking tired of like the entire concept of everything. Like, I was done with it. And I think if you do want a break from literally everything, and you feel like you need that, like, just try meditating and try to like put aside all this stupid kind of mythology and, you know, the dumbass fucking toxic elitism that surrounds it on like every side. Because really it comes down to like how it personally affects you. And like the only thing that really matters is the personal effect it has on a person. So anything else that anyone brings up like in connection with it, and even actual like Buddhist concepts or genuine, you know, like original parts of the meditation culture, they don't need to be important like to anyone. Like, you don't have to be trying to achieve the fuck is it called? Nirvana or anything like that. And you don't need to be trying to like see on a deeper level of reality or anything associated with that. Like, if you're just sick of everything and you want to like have a mental space or just a place in time where you can let everything go, then I would honestly recommend at least trying to meditate, because that's what I did. And while it's obviously still way too early, Because I mean, I'd say I've been like on and off, very on and off, as in like months of not practicing and then a few weeks of practicing for maybe a year and a half. But obviously having a sustained practice is how you can reap the most benefits. So those are my thoughts. I'm gonna keep this up. I don't know why I actually came out here with the intention of just like kind of cooling down and maybe meditating a little bit and just like giving myself a bit of time to relax and to not think about 100 fucking things that I should be doing that I procrastinated on. But I ended up making this video. So I guess today I've kind of failed in that pursuit. And I don't know why I made this either. If one person watches this whole thing, like, I would be shocked. But then if one person did, like, at least that would give me the minimum validation in making this in the first place. Like, one person actually listened to every word that came out of my mouth. I highly doubt it. You don't want to listen to someone walk around their neighborhood and talk in circles about nothing for possibly like 20 minutes. I don't know. I haven't been keeping track. Yeah, that's about it.